there, and welcome to another edition of Tour Confidential. I'm Ryan Asselta, and happy to be joined this week by former SI and ESPN golf writer Farrell, and joining us via Skype from the Arizona desert, Golf.com's Jessica Marksbury. And guys, as we've seen a lot over the last few weeks, Tiger Woods made headlines last week in the world of golf, not just when he announced he's coming back to the PGA Tour to play in the Hero World Challenge, but also Farrell, and we'll start with you, his comments about the golf ball. He echoed the sentiments that we heard from many of the greats that something needs to be done about the golf ball to reel in the length and the distance on the PGA Tour. What do you think of what Tiger had to say?
I mean, Tiger's absolutely right. I mean, we've seen this in this Tiger proofing that's happened. The irony, we've been lifting in these golf courses because of the technology, and Tiger kind of brought that about from his route in '97 at the Masters. But you know, the talent part of the game is kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. You know, guys can stand up and they can just hit it as far as they can, and the golf courses are getting longer as a result of technology. So I think it's taken a lot of the craftsmanship out of the game. So Tiger's exactly right. Yeah,
and Tiger was always a creative shot maker. Jess, when you hear Tiger talk about the golf ball, we've heard Jack Nicklaus talk about the golf ball. Greg Norman last week had some comments here in our studios about the golf ball. Will the powers that be do anything about the golf ball?
Well, I really enjoyed what our colleagues had to say in the email roundtable of Tour Confidential, saying, look, the long ball is what people want to see, right? I mean, the PGA Tour thrives on that. The fans love to see these guys hitting it over 350 yards on a consistent basis. Will it be going away anytime soon? I don't see that happening. I certainly don't see the USGA making any moves in the near future to roll back the ball. However, the fact that a player of Tiger's stature, Tiger himself, making comments about this issue, I think that's going to go a long way. I don't see anything changing soon, but the fact that more people are talking about it, it's in the headlines now, maybe more fans are thinking about these issues, and the fact that, yeah, a lot of these beautiful historic golf courses are going to become obsolete in the next decade if we don't do something about the golf ball. So I love the idea of the Masters kind of saying, hey, if you want to play our tournament in the future, you might have to play our golf ball. Now that is a really cool idea.
Yeah, and it would start probably with the Masters, Farrell, because they can do whatever they want. We know that. Right. The USGA, I don't see any changes happening. But let me show you some stats here, Farrell. The majors average last year was 11 under par. It's pretty similar to the last 20 years. You talk about the Masters specifically, okay? Last 10 years, average winning score, 10.5 under par. From 88 to 97, it was 11 under par. That's not a whole lot of change there. It has gone up about a stroke and a half in the last 10 years or so. But when you look at these golf courses, Augusta, hey, they've bought as much land as they can at this point when they took over some of the land from Augusta Country Club. There's not as much they can do with their land. Is Augusta where this would begin with trying to reel back? But when you hear those stats, is it even necessary?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the ball is going too far. And it's becoming where it's not golf. But what we know, as Jessica just alluded to, is that the industry really drives, is going to drive this decision. And every year, we're talking about ball technology. People don't buy new clubs every year. They buy drivers and they buy balls. And they're buying balls consistently. So I think that drives the game. So we're really going to see a lot of pushback. The USGA is really in control of this, and I don't think it's in their best interest or the interest of the game, the industry, because we're in a unique place. Golf, as we all know, golf is one of the few sports, like nobody's thinking about the Wilson football or the basketball. But in golf, that pyramid of influence, the average guy wants to play the same thing that the best players in the world are playing. And so we can't have this bifurcation where we have, you know, a separate, you know, the Masters, you're hitting a separate ball. And then when I go out with my boys on Sunday afternoon, you know, I can hit my drive 330. So I think we need a little bit of solidarity around the game for the industry's sake.
Well, that's been talked about for years now, Jess, is separating tour equipment and, you know, recreational golfer equipment, as Farrell is alluding to. We could be going down that path. You mentioned Augusta. I want to get your thoughts. The British Open seems to be where we've seen the biggest discrepancy as far as scores. The last 10 years, 9 under par. The last 5 years, 15 under par. That's about 8 strokes lower than the 1990s and early 2000s, Jess. Is that an example of the oldest courses becoming dated with modern technology?
I would have to agree with that, Ryan. Those are some great stats that you pulled up. And it's really interesting to think about some of those courses. The old course comes to mind, right? I mean, that's a course that we know is a shorter golf course. They've made some tweaks to it over the past couple of years. But that's it's the course, right, that nobody really wants to touch. Nobody wants to see the old course just get pummeled year after year after year. On the other hand, and Farrell, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this too, but does it really matter if these guys are shooting 19 under par, 25 under par, 28 under par? I mean, on a shorter golf course, lowest score wins, right? Whether you're playing a course that's 8,100 yards or 6,900 yards. To me, I think we probably have at least a few years of padding left to kind of stretch out some of these quote unquote shorter golf courses and let the guys just go as low as they can. I mean, we're seeing 58s and 59s being shot on the PGA Tour somewhat regularly now, at least over the past several years, but nobody's been touching 55, 56, 57. At the end of the day, it all comes down to, can you make a putt? Are you putting well? That's been the differentiator for the top players in the game since the beginning of time. So, I still think while, yes, we may be entering a danger zone, I think we're going to be okay, at least for several years to come.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a debate for several years to come as we continue to see different scores, like a 16 under at the U.S. Open, which, let's face it, the USGA probably could have controlled that score a little bit better. From a setup perspective, weather is uncontrollable. Guys, let's move on. On tour this week, Patrick Cantley gets his first career win out in Las Vegas, but Justin Rose making noise over in Europe. After winning over in China, he goes on to win back-to-back at the Turkish Airlines Open. When you look at a guy like Justin Rose, Farrell, this is a guy who's a major champion, an Olympic champion. Is he kind of underrated, though? We don't hear his name put in the category with the Dustin Johnsons, the Jordan Spieths, and the Rory McIlroys of the world.
I mean, Justin Rose is a pro's pro. I mean, everybody out there considers him a top 10, top 20 player week in and week out, and they expect him to be there. I think in terms of the splash and the excitement and all those kind of things, he's kind of one of these guys that you allude to is kind of taken for granted. But in terms of being an underrated player, I think he may be underrated by some who don't think of him as a player along the lines of Dustin Rose or a contemporary like Sergio. But he's definitely there as a top player and has been for the last, probably 10 years.
Jess, we see the question there, does Justin Rose get the respect he deserves? I know he has my respect and yours. We've spent plenty of time with Justin. You've had cocktails with Justin a few times now in your interviews. But when you look at Justin and his career, is it respected? 20 wins, though, as we said, we don't get the same, he's not in that same conversation that we always have of the big three, the big four, the big five.
That's so true. And I think part of it has been the fact that he's been out a bit with injury. He's kind of with the way it is on the PGA Tour these days, week in and week out, it's like if you're not playing one week, you are kind of forgotten about, and especially when a week stretches into months. And that's kind of been the case for Justin recently. He's had a couple injuries that he's had to deal with, but as he's showing, gosh, I mean, when he's on, he is really on. And I would say from the underrated perspective, yeah, he may not get the headlines that he necessarily deserves in the States, but when it comes to putting together a major championship pool, I always see his name, whether it's the Masters or especially the British Open. I think people can always count on him to be a contender.
Yeah, I don't know if it's his age because he's 37 or what we expected with the splash he came on back at the 98 Open Championship as an amateur, finishing in the top 5. Maybe we expected more, but I kind of put him in that category with Henrik Stenson. Very similar resume. Stenson has 22 wins, Rose 20, each with a major. Obviously, they both did well at the Olympics. So Rose playing some great golf right now. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Tour Confidential. Jessica, thanks for being with us and joining us from Arizona. Great to see you. And Farrell, as always, thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time right here on Golf.com.